started. My name is Brittany Mellinger, and I am the Fair Housing Training and Outreach Coordinator at the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission, and you are here as part of PHRC's Fair Housing Empower Hour series. Today, our topic is overcoming barriers to fair housing in rural communities. So I know we've got folks joining the session today from all around the state, so I'd encourage you to pop your name and the community that you're coming from into the chat so we can see where we have folks joining us from. I do want to let you know that today's session is being recorded, and this recording will be available at the after the session. We will make it available within the next week, as well as the slides from the recording will be available as well. So let's go ahead and get started. So fair housing is the right of all Pennsylvanians, whether you live in a rural, a suburban, or an urban community, you have the right to fair housing in our state. In today's session, we will be seeking to accomplish a few goals. So we hope you leave the session understanding an overview of who we are as an agency. We hope that you will be able to identify our relevant fair housing protections, so our laws and protected classes. We hope that you leave with a better understanding of our fair housing barriers, as well as our opportunities for collaboration and work towards housing equity in rural communities, as well as an understanding of the complaint process. Lastly, in all of our sessions, we encourage folks to ask questions about fair housing. So if you have a question, a comment, please feel free to put it in the chat. We will keep an eye on that throughout the presentation. And thank you to everyone who's said hello in the chat already. I may ask you for some input, some comments throughout the presentation. So keep that chat function handy. And I want to thank our ASL interpreters as well as our captioner for helping us to make this program accessible. So to start off, I want to provide a brief overview of the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission. So we are Pennsylvania's leading civil rights enforcement agency. We've been around since 1955, so we're celebrating 70 years this year. And we have a two-part mission. So we enforce Pennsylvania's non-discrimination laws, which include both the Pennsylvania Human Relations Act as well as the Pennsylvania Fair Educational Opportunities Act. So these laws enable Pennsylvanians to file complaints if they believe that they've experienced discrimination, whether it's in their housing, their employment, their education, their access to public spaces and services. They can file a complaint with our agency and have a neutral investigator look into the situation. But beyond just reacting and responding to situations and complaints as they come in, we also work to proactively promote equal opportunity for everyone in Pennsylvania. So in addition to virtual programs and trainings and workshops like this, we also offer events and conferences and ways to engage with our agency and to learn more. We have advisory councils throughout the state that actively work to share out information about Pennsylvanian civil rights into the community and also report back issues to us as well. I think I even saw a few advisory council members on today's training as well, so welcome. And if you would like any additional information on advisory councils or our ambassador program, which is similar to our councils but for individuals, please feel free to reach out to us and we'd be happy to give you some information on how to get connected with those efforts. As an agency, we serve the entire state of Pennsylvania, and we do that through 3 regional offices. So in the western part of the state, we have our Pittsburgh regional office. Through the central part of the state, we have, and that's in that light blue that you can see on the map there, you can see we've got a Harrisburg regional office. And then the eastern part of the state is covered by our Philadelphia regional office. These are the offices that accept complaints, that conduct investigations, adjudicate cases. We also have a central office that does the administrative functions of the agency as well. I had mentioned our laws at the top of the program, and I just want to briefly mention what they cover. So you can see that the Pennsylvania Human Relations Act really does a lot of the heavy lifting for our agency. It covers the bulk of our protections. So it covers discrimination in employment, in housing, commercial property, public accommodations, such as public businesses and services, as well as primary and secondary education up through high school. And then the Pennsylvania Fair Educational Opportunities Act extends that protection into post-secondary education, such as colleges, trade schools, and technical schools. If you'd like any further information about our agency, we've got a lot of fantastic information on our website, and you can definitely learn more. But we are going to shift our focus more squarely onto housing, since that's our topic today. So before I advance the slide, I'd love to invite anyone who's on the call today to put into the chat what they think the goals of fair housing are. What do you think our fair housing laws and our fair housing protections are seeking to do? And I will pause a moment to let folks have a second to respond. All right, thanks, Jennifer. To keep opportunity equal for all. Absolutely. Anyone else have any ideas on what fair housing is all about? Ending housing discrimination and promoting diversity in communities. Yeah, I love that one as well. So thank you so much for responding, allowing everyone equal access to safe and adequate housing. Yes, those are all aspects of fair housing. So at PHRC, we talk about fair housing as having two goals. So goal number one, ending housing discrimination, making sure that no one is kept out of housing opportunities because of discriminatory policies and practices. But it goes beyond just stopping those acts of discrimination. It works to actively promote diverse, inclusive communities, and we call that affirmatively furthering fair housing. Now, the federal definition of that was changed recently because of some recent federal actions, but that does not remove the need to continue to actively work to combat discrimination and make sure that we have inclusive communities and continue to work to combat segregation and housing inequalities throughout our Commonwealth. We have three levels of fair housing laws and protections. So we have the federal laws, which include the Fair Housing Act of 1968. There's also Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, which provides additional protections for individuals with disabilities and federally funded housing programs, as well as the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990, which provides additional protections for individuals with disabilities. As I mentioned at the top of the program, at the state level, our law is the Pennsylvania Human Relations Act, the PHRA, and that forms the basis of our protections, and that's the law that we enforce. And then at the local level, there are over 70 different local ordinances. They're often called human relations ordinances that provide even further protections, additional protected classes that go beyond what's offered at the federal and the state level. So if anyone is familiar with any local human relations ordinances or commissions that are active in your area, I'd encourage you to put them in the chat. I'd love to see if any folks are aware of those additional ordinances that are in place in their communities. And while you all are doing that, I'm going to move on to our next slide to talk about some more about our fair housing laws. So what do they cover? They cover the sale and rental of housing, as well as housing-related transactions. And when I'm talking about housing-related transactions, I'm talking about appraisals, I'm talking about inspections, I'm talking about mortgages, insurance, all of those industries that surround housing and can shape access to fair and affordable housing opportunities. The types of housing that are covered by our fair housing laws are broad, so it's anything from apartments to single-family homes, to manufactured housing communities, condominiums, public housing, nursing homes, dormitories, and more. even some types of shelters are covered by our fair housing laws, so they're very broad. And thanks so much for the comments in the chat that Philly and State College also have local ordinances and source of income protection, which does not exist at the state or the federal level, but is present in a few communities throughout Pennsylvania. So thank you so much for that comment. When we talk about discrimination, we talk about two theories or two types of discrimination. So there's disparate treatment. That's treatment that directly discriminates against a member of a protected class. So for example, if an individual with a disability would go to inquire about a housing opportunity and would be told by the housing provider, I'm sorry, I don't think this place is safe for you, so I'm not going to be able to rent this to you. They were directly denied housing because of their protected class. Disparate impact, on the other hand, can be a little bit more subtle. So that's a policy that's neutral on its face, but still has an impact on a member of a protected class. So if we're looking again at the protected class of disability, if a housing provider would have a policy that everyone needs to have full-time employment in order to qualify for their unit, that could have disparate impact on individuals with disabilities, because we know that individuals with disabilities have lower rates of full-time employment than the general population. So it doesn't mention a protected class, but it still could have that impact. So we're looking both at disparate treatment as well as disparate impact in terms of housing discrimination. Before I advance to the next slide, I'd love for everyone to get their chat ready and let me know what protected classes you're familiar with, either our state or our federal fair housing protections. What are some examples of protected classes that have protections under our fair housing laws? I'm going to pause a moment to let folks add in. Let's see, we've got age as well as familial status. Yes, what else? What are other groups of individuals that have protections against housing discrimination? Yeah, based on race, based on sex, absolutely. What else? We've got a couple more. See, race, color, national origin, religion, sex, familial status, and disability at the federal level. Yep, that's all 7 there. We've got religious creed and disability. Absolutely. So great job, everyone. Thank you so much. And we're going to talk about gender identity and sexuality under the protected class of sex in just a minute, as well as the use of and handling and training of support animals for disability. All right, and I see there's a comment about sexual HIV status and sexual orientation, and we can talk about that under the protected classes of disability as well as sex. So you guys did fantastic. So I'm going to pull up the full lists on the screen here. So on the left-hand side, you can see under the Federal Fair Housing Act, there are 7 protected classes. So there's race, there's color, national origin, familial status, religion, sex, and disability. At the state level, you can see that we have all of those mirrored. So we've got race, color, national origin, familial status, we term it religious creed, sex and disability, but we also add on age 40 and above, ancestry, as well as the use, handling, or training of support animals for disability. I'm going to go into more detail around familial status, sex, and disability, just to make sure that everyone has a full understanding of those. So under familial status, that includes families with children under the age of 18 who are living with their parents or their legal custodians. That includes people who are pregnant, as well as people who are securing custody of children under the age of 18, which includes both foster children and biological children. I also want to discuss sex as a protected class under the Pennsylvania Human Relations Act. So while you didn't see sexual orientation or gender identity, LGBTQ, as a separate protected class under our act, we did finalize regulations in 2023 that do establish that the term sex may refer to pregnancy status, childbirth status, breastfeeding status, sex assigned at birth, gender identity or expression, affectional or sexual orientation, as well as differences in sex development. So we utilize these regulations as we accept complaints, as we conduct investigations and adjudicate cases. And you can learn more on our website at the link there, which will take you to the regulations. We also have a fantastic fact sheet that's available in English and Spanish that does go into those protections in a little bit more detail. But what I want you to be aware of is that we do have those protections for anyone who believes that they may have experienced discrimination based on their sexual orientation, their gender identity, their expression, and they can file a protected class at our agency under the protected class of sex. There have been some federal changes, but those have not impacted our ability to accept those complaints at the state level. All right, then the last protected class that I want to discuss in more detail is disability. And that's defined as a physical or a mental impairment that substantially limits one or more of a person's major life activities. So some examples here include caring for oneself, walking, seeing, hearing, speaking, breathing, learning, or working. Now, this isn't an exhaustive list, but just some examples of how someone's disability might impact their major life activities. Our fair housing laws protect those who have a disability, those who have a history of a disability, as well as those who are regarded as having a disability. So it protects those who actually have a disability as well as those who believe they may have experienced unfair treatment based on housing providers' knowledge of their medical history or the way they perceive them as an individual with a disability. If they believe that they've experienced that type of discrimination, they can file a complaint with our agency. Now, there are a few exemptions that I want to mention. So individuals who are currently using illegal drugs or controlled substances are exempted from disability-related protection, but that does not include those who are in active recovery. So if someone is in active recovery, they do have fair housing protections, but if they're currently using controlled substances, they would be exempted from that. Additionally, individuals who pose a direct threat to the health and safety of others are also exempt from disability-related protections. Now I've got a big list of discriminatory actions on my next slide here. So these are some examples of what housing discrimination can look like. So it's anything from discriminatory statements, whether that's in an advertisement or whether that's in a conversation with a housing provider or a realtor stating a preference or a limitation based on protected class. That's discriminatory. If there's discriminatory inquiries when someone's looking to rent or buy a home, if you're asking about someone's protected class and making decisions based on that, that's discriminatory. Steering someone, whether that's to a certain neighborhood or a certain floor of a unit, whether that's to a certain type of housing based on someone's protected class, that's limiting their housing opportunities, and that's a discriminatory practice. Refusing to sell, lease, or finance housing, just flat out refusal, as well as providing an unfair appraisal of the value of someone's home based on their protected class. Predatory lending, so discriminating in the terms and conditions of someone's loan for a house. That would be housing discrimination, as well as discriminating in the housing terms and conditions. So looking at the lease and the policy that would oh, lost my train of thought there. That would shape someone's access to housing. Looking at the finances, like the amount of the security deposit, looking at the rules and the regulations surrounding the use of the housing facility. Unequal provision of services and facilities, whether that's maintenance services or the ability to use the laundry room or the pool or the gym on the property. Sexual harassment or harassment based on any protected class would be discriminatory, as well as the refusal to provide reasonable accommodations and modifications for individuals with disabilities who need those changes in order to be able to use and enjoy their housing. Those are all examples of types of discrimination that individuals might experience based on their protected class. I want to move on from our housing basics and talk a little bit about fair housing in rural communities, because that's why we're all here today, right? We want to learn a little bit more about how these laws apply to our communities and how we can work together to foster fair housing opportunities in our communities. I started out the presentation talking about our two goals of fair housing, right? Ending housing discrimination and promoting diverse and inclusive communities. Oftentimes our Empower Hours talk more specifically about ending discriminatory practices. But today we're going to talk a little bit more and center our presentation more around how we can create those housing opportunities in rural areas. So I want to start out with a graphic from the Center for Rural Pennsylvania that was looking at populations in 2020 across our state, really looking at there's a lot of different ways of determining which areas are rural and which ones aren't. But this one just provides a general picture. So the counties that are shaded in green are considered to be rural, and there's 48 of those. And then 19 are considered to be urban, and those are the ones that are in the white. In 2023, nearly 3.37 million people, or about 26% of Pennsylvania's population, lives in our 48 rural counties. So it's a wide swath of our geography, but it's a smaller proportion of the population. So a lot of times we don't focus on these needs specifically. What are our demographic trends in our more rural communities throughout Pennsylvania? Well, it's marked by decreasing populations. So there's a projected decline of the population of about 5.8% over the next 30 years, so up until about 2050, and that's according to the Center for Rural Pennsylvania. Looking at the past 20 or so years, we've seen a lot of increase of racial and ethnic diversity, and that's projected to increase as well. So from 2000 to 2023, rural Pennsylvania's population became more racially diverse. It went from about 5% of the population that were non-white or Hispanic to 11% in 2023. So that's a pretty significant increase. We also saw changes in the age of the population. So the baby boomer generation is retiring and aging, and that's paired with the statewide birth rate, which is decreasing. So we're seeing that decrease with families with children. And then along with age, that often accompanies changing abilities as well. So we are also seeing an increase of the population that has disabilities as well. All right. But I want to note that our communities don't all have access to the same resources. Whether we're talking about the diversity of housing types, whether that's single-family homes, apartment buildings, tiny homes, granny flats, multifamily housing, manufactured housing, a wide range of housing types to meet the wide range of housing needs of our population. Affordable housing options, housing that's affordable to everyone at their income level. Accessible housing options that individuals with disabilities are able to use and enjoy for their housing. Healthy housing that's free from environmental hazards such as lead and pests and mold and radon and other factors that can impact the health of families and individuals throughout the Commonwealth. Transportation options to get to and from their housing, to work, to faith communities, to social networks, that can be limited in rural communities, especially if someone doesn't have a car or doesn't have the ability to drive. That could be a limiting factor, which can significantly constrain someone's ability to choose housing in the area of their choice. Educational opportunities, whether that's grade school education or post-secondary education as well. Community services, whether you're looking at doctor offices or social service agencies or even stores and facilities in your area. Employment opportunities that pay a living wage. internet options that'll allow you to access information and connect to communities throughout the Commonwealth, as well as housing information that allow you to make informed decision about your housing. And we know that a lot of these factors that we just discussed are informed by systemic housing inequality. A lot of the inequities and disparities that we see throughout our communities that impact individuals in protected classes are informed by patterns and practices and policies and laws that didn't come about by accident. They came about through years of laws and practices and choices that have shaped who can access quality housing and affordable housing, fair housing choice throughout our Commonwealth and throughout our nation. So you can see the graphic here on the screen that has these intersecting gears. And I think that's a good way to think about this. It's these policies that are all working together to shape housing access. Whether you're looking at single family zoning and exclusionary zoning that keeps a diversity of housing opportunities out of our community, whether you're looking at FHA loans that were available primarily to white households for many, many years, redlining, which shaped investment in communities based on protected characteristics, so, primarily looking at race, looking at religion, and looking at national origin. GI Bill benefits, which theoretically all veterans had access to, but which our veterans of color had a much harder time using because of redlining and restrictive covenants and other restrictions that kept them from being able to use them. Looking at blockbusting, which was real estate agents that profiteered off of people's fears of racially integrated communities and what that might mean for their housing values. The racial segregation of public housing, which was present at the inception of public housing and continued for many years. Urban renewal, which was very consequential for many communities of color as they were building major transportation projects, major facilities. It often happened in communities of color that were bulldozed and cut off from resources, steering people to different areas, to different neighborhoods based on their class, as well as deed restrictions and racial covenants, which restricted who could move into certain neighborhoods and buy certain houses. So throughout the 20th century, many of these things worked together to shape housing access. And while the Fair Housing Act and the Pennsylvania Human Relations Act do prohibit these practices, the impact is still seen today. And we can see that throughout our rural communities. So let's talk about some of the housing challenges that we see in rural communities. And as I'm going through the ones on the screen, I'd encourage you to add in anything that I might have missed that you're seeing in your community or in the folks that you're serving. Anything else that you think might make this list more robust or more reflective of what you're seeing in the reality in your communities. So we see financial and structural impacts of deindustrialization. So as a lot of industries have moved out of rural communities throughout the state, leaving behind a wide range of the population that now doesn't have the same employment opportunities and the same income, can lead to some of the blight, the aging housing stock, a lack of investment in new housing, as well as higher construction costs that might be seen in other communities. Restrictive zoning that keeps multifamily housing from being built, that keeps affordable housing from being built. Resistance to development of affordable housing. We often see that come out of different communities and community members that fear what having those housing options available in their community might mean and how that might change their community. That can also prevent these projects from moving forward. a lack of governmental resources to invest in housing, whether that's at the local, at the state, and the federal level. Limited housing assistance programs, so not enough assistance for the households that need that extra financial assistance or services to be able to meet those housing needs, as well as competition for housing resources from remote workers who now have flexibility to live far away from where their corporations or their agencies are headquartered, and now can live in more rural areas and afford a different standard of housing than they might have in a different area. Lack of rental housing codes is a big one that we see. There is no statewide property maintenance code that's in place to ensure that everyone has access to safe rental housing, and we see that's especially prevalent in rural areas that don't have the same resources in terms of code enforcement officers that could go out if there's a significant housing issue that's impacting the health and safety of someone's home. Environmental hazards, which could risk someone's health, as well as limited internet infrastructure and options. That can impact someone's ability to access information and jobs and services and things like that. All right, so I'm looking at the chat, and thank you to everyone who has commented there. I see a lack of hospital beds being 3+ hours away. I know a lot of rural hospitals have been closing, and there's been consolidation of healthcare systems, limiting those resources, meaning that folks can't access that. And I see that there were some folks in the chat that's affirming that. Land bank prospecting. And I'd invite you to say anything more that you'd like to about that. I see there's a comment, there's no actual agreed upon definition of rural, less money, etc. Yeah, there's a lot of different standards that are used that I found in my research, and there's no one specific definition of rural. So what one study might cite as rural might not be cited in another. So I think that's important to note as well. Fewer options for educational services. Absolutely. Starter homes that are being bought to turn into rental housing. So taking those housing options that might have been someone's entry into home ownership to start building that equity and that generational wealth, not being available and instead being turned into rental housing for investors. Lack of economic opportunity, generational poverty, and underfunded schools. Yes, absolutely. As well as limited infrastructure for disabled people or people with disability, especially folks that have mobility limitations. So thank you all for sharing those barriers and those challenges, and the emergence of short-term rental units, Airbnb, VRBO. Yes, over the past decade or so, that has certainly risen in prominence as well, taking those housing opportunities that might have been available for folks who live in the community and now are short-term rental units as well. So thank you everyone for sharing those perspectives and those issues as well. All right, so who do we see that bears the brunt of these challenges? Well, you can see the list on the screen here. It lines up pretty well with our protected classes. So individuals with disabilities, or senior citizens, people who are pregnant, people who have lower incomes, individuals with mental health needs, our veterans, our seasonal workers, which often come from immigrant communities. And it can be a challenge for many of these folks as they're seeking to access quality and affordable housing, as well as healthcare, as well as services and things like that. Now, I don't want to paint too bleak of a picture. There's also a lot of benefits that folks experience living in rural communities, and there's a lot of reasons why folks want to live in these types of communities throughout our state. whether it's from a lower cost of living to family connections and heritage in the area, support systems that are there, access to natural spaces. There are absolutely gorgeous spaces throughout Pennsylvania in our rural communities, a lot of natural recreation, dark skies, pristine forests, things like that. Proximity to agricultural opportunities and forestry jobs. You're going to find many more of those opportunities in rural communities than you will in our urban centers, as well as a slower pace of life. And for those of you who are living in rural communities, please feel free to add to that list in the chat. We'd love to hear from you why you live in a rural community and what you really love about that as well. But while folks are adding to that list as well, I want to talk about some strategies to work on advancing housing equity in rural communities. How we can make sure that we are meeting the needs of our community members across all protected classes and all demographic groups. And that starts with developing inclusive community partnerships that include a diversity of lived and professional experience. So making sure that you're getting input from folks with wide perspectives, not assuming that a small group of folks are going to speak as representative for a community and know what those community needs are. Making sure that there's fair housing training and information available. We've got a lot of fantastic information and programs that are available at PHRC, as well as from our fair housing partners across the state to make sure that everyone is fully aware of their rights and their responsibilities, because we all have a role to play in fair housing, whether it's ourselves as residents, accessing housing opportunities for ourselves, to housing providers, to local lenders and realtors, real estate agents, our local government officials. We all have a role to play. Making investments in housing affordability and community infrastructure to make sure that these resources are available and accessible. Ensuring that our community planning efforts center the needs of individuals in protected classes. So as communities are making their consolidated plans, as they are making fair housing plans, as they're looking at their zoning maps and things like that, making sure that community perspectives are centered and the needs of individuals in protected classes are recognized and planned for. Promoting first-time homeownership programs, developing them in your community if there aren't any currently there, as well as making sure that there's access to housing counseling and homebuyer education to make sure that folks have the financial literacy tools and the knowledge of both rental systems, as well as the process of homeownership and how to take the steps to get there. You don't know what you don't know, and it's important to have those tools available to help folks achieve their financial and their housing goals. Let's see, advocating for local government support for housing, making sure that your local elected officials know what housing needs are available or are present in your community, seeing how that's impacting. So that way when housing projects come up, when there are opportunities, you can get their vocal support to move those forward, because that's really key for them to hear from community members that are supportive of these opportunities. Funding programs that can preserve existing housing. It can be very expensive to build new housing, and sometimes it can be more affordable to preserve and to upgrade what's currently there. Pennsylvania has some of the oldest housing stock in the country, and there are some programs that can be utilized to be able to keep them in a healthy condition. Employing inclusionary zoning practices to make sure that a diversity of housing options are available into communities, as well as utilizing community land trusts to acquire developable land, as well as vacant housing. So who can work together to do this work? It takes a wide range of partners, anywhere from your local government administrators to your elected leaders at the state, at the local level, the federal level, engaging with those leaders to help educate them on housing needs. Your faith communities that might be connecting with folks that are in need, as well as faith communities that might be sitting on land that could be used to support community housing needs as well. There's a big movement called Yes in God's Backyard. So faith communities that are looking to enact their faith mission by engaging around community housing needs as well. Community benefit organizations and nonprofits can play a huge role, whether that's housing counseling agencies, United Ways, Community Action, refugee resettlement agencies, Centers for Independent Living, and more. There's a wide range of social services agencies and community benefit organizations that might be available in your community, as well as public housing authorities that can share information about federal programs and housing opportunities that are available. Fair housing organizations such as FIPS or Fair Housing Initiative programs that receive funding to share fair housing information. Local universities that might be able to help with research or grant applications or other ways to engage around the intersection of the housing needs in the community, as well as educational opportunities for students and professors. Local housing option teams, which are groups that work together to address housing needs. Housing provider networks, your local landlord organizations, real estate professionals, as well as developers. These are all folks that can work together to form effective coalitions to address fair housing needs. Now, of course, we don't want to have housing discrimination be happening in our communities, but we know that it does. We receive complaints every day. So in every program, we try to include information about how to file a complaint. So that way folks have full awareness of that and can reach out to PHRC when they believe that they've experienced housing discrimination, whether that's in a rural or an urban community or anything in between. So that process starts by contacting one of our offices. So you can call our central number, 717-787-4410, or you can reach out to any of the regional offices that I highlighted at the beginning of the program in Harrisburg, Philadelphia, or Pittsburgh. We also have an email address and a website that you can reach out to get in touch with one of our team members to find out some more information. But the starting point of any fair housing complaint starts at intake. So you connect with one of our intake team members, fill out a housing questionnaire where you provide contact information, what you believe you've experienced, why you believe you've experienced it, and who you're filing against. So that way we can assess your information to see if this is something that we can investigate under our state law. So if this complaint is jurisdictional, if it's timely, if it's filed within 180 days of the date of the last harm, then the intake team can help you to finalize your complaint, and then you'll receive a copy of that finalized complaint, and then the person that has been filed against will also be notified as well. At this point, the complaint moves into investigation. So both parties are asked to provide information to a neutral investigator who's responsible for investigating if there is a violation of our state law. And they may do this by asking for documents, interviewing witnesses, holding a fact-finding hearing, or seeking other ways of obtaining evidence. We have a stellar mediation team, and mediation services might be an option depending on the case and depending if both parties agree to mediation. So both parties have to agree for mediation to move forward. But even if mediation isn't an option, the investigator will also explore if it's possible to settle the case before coming to a finding. But if mediation isn't employed, if there isn't a settlement, then the case proceeds through investigation until it reaches a finding. And there's two potential outcomes. There's probable cause or no probable cause. I'll start with no probable cause. So that means that there wasn't enough evidence to determine that discrimination occurred. So at this point in the process, because this finding has been found, that's pretty much where this case stops. Someone can appeal it if they would like to, if they believe that we did not follow the correct process, but that's pretty much the end of the case. If probable cause is found, that means that there was enough evidence to determine that discrimination did exist and that there was a violation of our state law. So at this point, our agency is no longer neutral. So we advance to conciliation or to a public hearing, or even the case might be filed in court. And the goal for PHRC is to seek a remedy for the discrimination that occurred. The amount of time that it takes to investigate a case really can vary. There's no standard. It takes this amount of days. It really depends on the evidence, on how quickly both parties respond, as well as other factors. Now, why would someone choose to file a complaint knowing that there's this extensive process and that it takes time and effort? Well, there are significant remedies that can be achieved. So for an individual with disability that was denied that reasonable accommodation or modification that they needed, whether that's a service animal, whether that's a change to zoning to allow a group home for individuals with disabilities, whether that's a reserved parking space, they can get that, that change to be made. Maybe there's discriminatory lease terms or problematic terms in other policies. Might be able to get those changes made so that way all residents of that housing provider have fair policies now. There's often required posting of fair housing notices, so that way everyone understands their rights and responsibilities. And oftentimes there's training for respondents as well, so that way they fully understand their obligation under our fair housing laws. There's also financial remedies that are possible, whether it's reimbursements of fees and out-of-pocket expenses due to the discrimination or as part of the investigative process. Might be money for humiliation and embarrassment. Now, I want to note that this is only available in our fair housing and commercial property cases, not in our public accommodation, education, and employment cases. It's similar to pain and suffering. It's money that acknowledges the impact of discrimination on an individual. And then lastly, there might be civil penalties if it advances to a public hearing, a payment for the violation of our state laws. Lastly, I want to highlight a couple of awards to give you an idea of the types of cases that we see and potential remedies there. So 1.5 million for a housing provider that failed to provide accessible units and ignored requests for reasonable accommodations for tenants with disabilities. $100,000, that was a case where a maintenance worker sexually harassed a female tenant. $90,000, a housing provider revoked a lease and failed to address neighbor harassment that was based on race. And then lastly, $77,000, a housing provider made discriminatory statements and refused to rent to a household based on familial status. You can see these cases really span a wide variety of protected classes as well as acts of harm, discriminatory practices as well. There are a number of resources that are available for you if you want to learn more, if you have questions. After you leave this training, we're not going to leave you stranded. We've got lots of great information, whether it's customized fair housing training and consultations. We also offer training on a wide variety of other topics about civil rights as well, and you can find all of that linked on the screen here. We offer these Fair Housing Empower Hour series monthly, and we always let you know what's coming up on our social media, and I will also include the upcoming quarter of fair housing trainings as well. We've got brochures and fact sheets that are available, as well as a show on PCN TV. It's called PHRC Speaks, Fair Housing Forward, and that's conversations with community leaders, housing providers, and other professionals that are working to move fair housing efforts forward. And then we also offer a quarterly fair housing e-newsletter to keep you in the loop with what's changing in fair housing. I'm going to leave you with my contact information as well as our central office address, phone number, and our website. So that way you can reach out if you would like to. I also am putting you also should see that there's a QR code on the screen here. So if you want to leave us some feedback on the quality of this training, you can feel free to pull out your phone and pull out the camera app, and that'll take you to a quick survey. It will also allow you to download a certificate of participation that you participated in today's program, and you can save that for your records. At this point, we've got about 10 minutes left, so I'm going to open up to questions, and I think I see a few questions in the chat as well, and I'm going to read and respond to, but please feel free to offer any additional comments that you have, any questions about our topic today, as well as general fair housing questions. Now is your opportunity to voice those as well. All right, I see a comment that rural communities in Pennsylvania are smaller and people know a lot of the people living there. When someone from a minority class moves in, the landlord may not have an issue, but neighbors or others in the community might act in a discriminatory manner. Absolutely, someone's housing opportunities might be impacted by neighbor-to-neighbor harassment based on unwelcoming comments and things like that. And as I mentioned at the top of the presentation, PHRC has broader protections than just housing. We also have protections in public accommodations, public spaces, employment, education, commercial properties as well. We also have a stellar civil rights outreach division, which has outreach coordinators that can come out and address situations of community tension where there are issues. And you can find a lot of great information on our website about that as well. So thank you for that comment as well. All right, I'm going to read through for any other questions. Thank you for the discussion around pregnancy and adoption under familial status in the chat as well, for those that offered that clarification. All right. Well, that is the end of the presentation today. You can expect an email from me in the coming week that'll have access to the slides from today, as well as the recording, some additional resources. And please feel free to reach out to me with any questions. I do see a question in here about resources for tenants whose landlords do not make repairs or take care of mold. Yeah, so that's significant, and it's a significant issue. That can impact housing opportunities for individuals. If they believe that these actions are being taken because of their protected class, or if it's a policy that impacts protected classes, of course, you can send them to our agency, send them to our main number, and we can, our intake team can talk to them about a potential complaint. But I also want to let you know that in some communities throughout the Commonwealth, there are code enforcement offices. That might be a good place to start as well, to see if there are any additional resources to enforce code enforcement and building standards in the communities that might have some local local resources there. The Attorney General's office also has a landlord and tenant guide that has some information on addressing habitability issues. So rental conditions that would impact someone's health and safety if there's a major hole in the roof, if there's water getting into the building, if there's a lack of heat, a lack of plumbing, significant infestations, things like that. Tenants do have some rights under the Landlord-Tenant Act, and there are some ways that they can address that. And I would encourage folks to read that Landlord-Tenant Guide really closely before taking any actions, such as withholding rent or repairing and deducting, to make sure that they're going through the appropriate process, since that's really important. All right, I am not seeing any additional questions. I will hang out for a minute, but I will release the rest of you. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and thank you so much for taking your lunch hour to learn with us today. I hope you have a great afternoon.